My name's Dr. Stuart Grassian.
And could you SPL that for us a little louder, too, so the court reporter can hear you?
Sure. It's SCUART, Stuart, and Grassian is GRASSAN.
All right. And where do you live generally?
Right outside of Boston in the Chestnut Hill section.
And tell the jury, what do you do for a living?
I'm a psychiatrist.
All right. And what's your educational background?
Well, my undergraduate degree is from Harvard University. I have a master's degree in sociology from Brandeis. My MD degree is from New York University Medical Center, where I also did an internship in medicine and then went on to Harvard Medical School, the Beth Israel Hospital in Boston, where I did a residency in adult and adolescent psychiatry. Became board certified in psychiatry in 1979, and also have a JD degree that I got in 1986 at night school.
And JD meaning you have basically a law degree?
I have a law degree, yeah.
Many years ago, right?
Many years ago.
Okay, all right. And do you also teach, or have you taught just kind of on the academic side or something?
Yes. I mean, I was on the clinical faculty at Harvard Medical School for.
Okay, and then, just real quickly in terms of, I don't want to get into all of this, but just in terms of like board certifications, is there some kind of board that psychiatrists are on that's, important to your profession or required?
Yeah. Well, the official board that recognizes the specialty certification is the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology, and I've been board certified since 1979.
Thank you. You're going to have to keep speaking up, because you're kind of trailing off. Sorry, I don't think moving that close is going to help.
No.
You just got to speak up. And so, are you in good standing, so to speak, with the board?
Yes.
Of your profession?
Fine, yes.
Okay, all right. And in the course of how long have you been a psychiatrist now?
A long time. I completed my residency in 1977.
Okay, and during the course of your career dating back to 77, has there been any particular area of psychiatry that you've taken a special interest in?
Well, yes. As you're aware, I've become kind of a well-known expert regarding the psychiatric effects of solitary confinement. I also have done some research in work regarding memory of traumatic events, and...
Okay, and have you testified in courtrooms like this one around the country over the course of your career?
Yes, quite a number of times.
Okay, can you just tell the jury, just give them some context as to why you would be called into a courtroom, what kind of things you've talked to jurors about over the course of your career?
Well, God, there's such a wide variety. Often, it has to do with things like the psychiatric effects of a person having been in solitary. Sometimes people commit bad acts, crazy acts, and it's important to understand the mental state the person was in at the time of the act. People have been in solitary and have suffered terribly and for no good reason, and courts have found, malicious prosecution and recently awarded quite significant damages, in the millions, for that.
Did you testify? I mean, are you one of those guys that only testifies for one side or the other, or how does that kind of work in your industry?
My testimony regarding solitary confinement is basically always about the psychiatric effects of solitary confinement, but that can take all kinds of different forms, like, for example, one time I was hired by the federal defender for a case involving an accused terrorist, the Millennium Bomber, and my work really was very much in cooperation with a very senior FBI guy who's involved with behavioral analysis. It was basically, the way they were treating him in solitary, it was cause he had been cooperating and helping the government, and then they started treating him harshly with solitary, and he just shut up, and we were able to turn that around for a while.
So you kind of work on both sides of the aisle?
Yeah.
Real? Last question I'm going to ask you about your background is, have you spent time studying larger groups of people as it relates to solitary confinement, like prison studies, or anything of that nature?
Well, I've been involved in both individual and also class action lawsuits involving solitary confinement and, have been involved in testifying in legislatures and stuff. Altogether, I've probably evaluated, several hundred people who were in solitary or had been in solitary, a number of hundreds.
May I approach?
You may.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked as Exhibit MMM, and just take a quick look at that, if you would.
Okay. That looks pretty familiar.
Is that a copy of your CV, or your resume, curriculum vitae?
Yes. I typed it myself.
Okay, and does this highlight a lot of things that we've talked about, plus others?
Yes.
Is one of the additional sections of information on here about literature that you've published in this particular area?
Yes.
And so you've done that on a number of occasions, too?
Yes. My first publication in this area was in the American Journal of Psychiatry, and it really created quite a change in things.
Move to admit MMM. Defendant's Exhibit MMM offered.
No objection. All right. Without objection, MMM is admitted. Defendant's Exhibit MMM admitted.
May I publish?
You may.
Thank you. Defendant's Exhibit MMM published.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. So just tell the jury what you do on a daily basis, like what you do as your Monday through Friday in terms of your profession.
Sure. I have a clinical practice in my home. I used to do work in hospitals as well, but I don't any longer, just in my own home. And in addition, I do get involved in forensic cases, many of which have to do with the psychiatric effects of solitary confinement involving class action lawsuits, individual lawsuits. I do work pro bono for a governmental organization in New York State in which I've helped review mental health files of patients, inmates who had mental health problems to see whether they're getting adequate treatment. You know, as I said, I give lectures at the Harvard Medical School Center on bioethics, other places, as well, Harvard Law School on those particular issues.
Okay, so you see patients?
Yes.
Okay, did there come a time when I reached out to you to assist in this?
You did.
Yeah, just tell the jury kind of what you remember about that, and what I guess the demand, if you will, or the request was on our part.
I can't say I remember it in detail, but I understand that Mr. Allen had made some potentially or seemingly incriminating statements while he was in solitary confinement, and there was a question of whether his conditions of confinement, his mental state, may have had an important impact on the statements that he was making.
Okay, and did I offer you up information to review at some point?
Yes.
In order to, before we really started talking?
Of course, yes.
Okay, just tell the jury what, generally, you recall of that information.
Sure. There was Dr. Westcott's INE report, there was medical records and other records from the jails that he was in, videos of especially of that time when he was most deranged, and a bunch of other records, as well.
Okay.
I don't remember as I sit here, maybe you could refresh my memory.
Well, do you recall listening to some audio of phone calls?
Oh, yes, of course, that's right, and transcripts of interviews of corrections officers who'd not just corrections officers, also inmates who had been companions and had heard him make statements and were then interviewed by investigators.
Okay, and was there a general time frame that was associated with that?
Yes. It was from, what was it? November of 22 to April, May, a little bit of June of 23.
Okay, did I also provide you some information earlier this year, and I think January or February maybe, from Wabash Valley?
Oh, yes, up to about February of 24, I think, or March 24, I recall that.
Okay, and in the course of reviewing that information, was there anything that stood out to you in terms of these incriminating statements that were being made by Mr. Allen?
Yes. I mean, there's no doubt that Mr. Allen was in a...
Judge, may we approach?
Sidebar conference conducted.
Judge, I thought we discussed that he could not discuss an opinion specifically about Mr. Allen. He could talk about the effects of solitary confinement. He can talk about the possible results of solitary confinement, but not about Mr. Allen specifically. And he was about to say it is clear to him that Mr. Allen. And that is an opinion about Mr. Allen himself.
Well, I don't know what he was about to say, honestly. I don't know that any can predict what he was about to say, but...
It's troubling that you don't know what your own witness is going to say, Mr. Rossi.
Well, I do think I know what he was going to say.
Okay. And he was going to say.
He's going to say that he heard Mr. Allen say things that...
He doesn't know the facts of the case.
No.
Yeah, he does. He's reviewed all kinds of stuff.
He didn't include any police reports in that list of things he said read.
Inaudible.
Okay. Well, he can't say.
It's okay, I'm listening.
No, I mean, he can't testify, he can testify to the effects of solitary confinement, or the psychiatric thought process, and the fact it's not healthy. But you're staying away from him testifying about what Mr. Allen said. If it's a confession or not, that's for a jury to determine.
I understand.
So he can educate the jury about the effects of solitary confinement, inaudible, effects of solitary confinement in general terms.
Even if he knows what the charges are, he can't say that he made a statement inconsistent with the facts of the case.
No.
He cannot say that.
I don't understand how he can't testify to something that we all know is patently false.
No, we don't all know that.
That's for the jury to decide.
That's for the jury to decide.
That's for the jury to determine.
Well, the fact that the girls weren't shot at patently false, right?
Well, yes. So I don't know how you're gonna parse those things out.
I'm trying to get this right. I'll tell you what, I'll get to the scientific stuff.
Yeah, get to the science.
All right.
Sidebar conference concluded.
May I continue?
You may.
Thank you. So, Dr. Grassian, let's talk about solitary confinement, okay?
Sure.
That's what you're here to talk about. Tell the jury. Explain to the jury what that phrase even means in a clinical sense or in a professional sense.
Well, basically solitary confinement is the confinement of an individual in a small cell, roughly 80 or 90 square feet, with minimal opportunities for perceptual stimulation. There's very limited opportunities for any kind of meaningful social interaction, and no real opportunities for occupational stimulation. So it's an enormously lonely, helpless environment and is very toxic to mental functioning. People cannot function for any extended period of time with continuing inadequate levels of stimulation. They can't maintain an adequate state of alertness. And in the worst cases, of course in the most severe.
Objection, Judge.
That were presented.
Sustained.
Okay, did you, when you reviewed those videos, did you find the conditions that Mr. Allen was enduring as meeting those conditions that you just associated with solitary confinement?
Totally. And his.
Judge, may I ask a preliminary question?
You may.
Dr. Grassian, what is your familiarity with the conditions of Mr. Allen's confinement?
What I read in the notes from Dr. Walla, from other sources, that he was basically in a small cell, very barren, had very little to do except read the Bible.
Did you ever visit?
Was on a.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Was laying on a mattress on the floor, there was sometimes mice droppings. I've never visited the facility, no, but I've
Okay.
visited so many that it doesn't seem, unfortunately, all that is similar from other facilities I have seen.
So you know that he's in a one-man cell?
Yes.
But you never visited WCU?
Not that particular facility, no.
And can you distinguish between the circumstances that you learned from, say, someone like Dr. Walla versus information provided to you by another inmate?
Judge, I'm gonna object. This seems like more of like cross-examination at this point.
Yeah. Is there a basis for the objection?
Well, he said he learned it from a lot of different sources, and I'm just wondering if those would be considered reliable sources, since he never visited the prison.
They're the same sources that Officer Harshman testified that he gathered information and generated.
We're not getting into comparing different witnesses back and forth. Finish your foundational questions for your objection.
Okay, so, Dr. Grassian, you saw video provided by the defense, is that correct?
Yes.
And you're familiar with what a one-man cell might look like, is that fair?
I'm also familiar with what the video shows itself.
Okay, no other questions, Judge.
Okay.
May I continue?
You may proceed.
What are the international standards for solitary confinement, and who regulates that?
Well, unfortunately, they're not regulated by any international body. The United Nations considers anything more than 15 days of solitary confinement to be a form of torture because of its
Judge, I'm gonna object
toxic effect.
to this line of questioning. The international standards for solitary confinement does not have any applicability to the WCU or the Indiana Department of Corrections, if we could limit it to that area.
Judge, this is opinion testimony by an expert who has laid a foundation that he's had a career in this business of solitary confinement. And the fact that there are different standards in different areas of the world has a tendency to prove that the standard that is being used here may or may not be excessive. That's the jury's determination, but
Okay. But he's testified there are no international standards, so I'll sustain the objection. Move on.
does.
I may have mischaracterized
Hold on.
Hold on, sir.
my testimony.
Yeah, that's all right. Does the United Nations recognize solitary?
Yes.
Okay. And do they have policies and standards through the United Nations regarding solitary confinement?
They do. I mean, obviously, what I was trying to indicate is they have no authority to impose those on any particular jurisdiction.
Okay, but the 15 days is their standard?
That is their standard, and it's the standard in many jurisdictions.
Okay, you talked about some of the symptoms that one might suffer from solitary confinement. You just started to touch on. Would you briefly identify those for the jury?
Well, in the most severe cases, people become overtly delirious, they become disoriented, confused. Their memory for events disappears very typically. In fact, when a person recovers from delirium, one of the frightening things they experience is they have no memory for what happened during the period of time that they were delirious. Their behavior regresses to a point of that's really kind of grotesque. Smearing feces, unfortunately, is one of the more common things that happens to people in delirium, but, acting out sexually, being naked, smearing themselves, throwing things all over the ground and not knowing what they're doing, where they are. That's about as bad as it gets, of course. In that context, of course, there are situations where people have seriously injured themselves or killed themselves. But, even people who tolerated the solitary confinement better than that will find they have difficulties with memory, with concentration, with thinking, they become hyper-responsive to stimulation, they can't stand stimulation at all, they become.
And you mentioned the word delirium. There was a question about that earlier in the trial. Can you just tell the jury kind of clinically what delirium is? I think you've kind of touched on that.
Well, yeah, delirium is the inability to maintain an adequate state of alertness, so the person becomes mentally confused, can't think straight, can't remember things well. When it really gets bad, it's like you have this huge fog or this thick soup in your head and everything just floats by and nothing makes any sense at all, just a total bewilderment.
What causes delirium?
Well, it can be caused generally by two types of factors. One is internal factors. The internal activating system is deranged. For example, people in severe sepsis, people in severe congestive heart failure, respiratory failure, other organ system failure can develop delirium. Another thing that can cause IT is inadequate levels of external stimulation, so we see it in people, for example, in medical situations. Eye patch patients have developed it, poliomyelitis patients in the past who were in iron lungs, who are sort of confined to these iron lungs, that was a major problem for them. We also have things called ICU psychosis, intensive care unit psychosis. I recently had cataract surgery, spoke with my ophthalmologist. He's really familiar with the whole problem with eye-patched patients and visually impaired patients developing hallucinations and sometimes becoming overtly confused and delirious, so it was interesting that he had had that experience, as well.
So it could be caused by medical conditions, or just external stressors.
Or external, the deprivation of external stimulation, like an eye patch patient.
Okay.
A patient in an iron lung, they have very little in the way of external stimulation.
And so did you get a chance to listen to phone calls that I sent you of Mr. Allen and various people?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and in listening to those phone calls, without getting into what was said, did you see any indicators of this onset of delirium or existence? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Judge, I would object to him relating it to Mr. Allen's phone calls specifically. He can talk about the phenomenon and how it could be brought about by his environment, but not with respect to Mr. Allen specifically.
Judge, Aga in, he said he's reviewed an INE, 130 to 26-page INE, videos, audio, transcripts, and that he's listened to the audio of these phone calls. I think he's got a proper foundation to generate an opinion about whether he sees symptoms consistent with delirium. I'm not asking him if he...
As long as that's how the witness limits the answer.
Okay, I can't, I appreciate that. May I continue?
As long as you limit the answer, yes.
Did you see symptoms consistent with this delirious state? Yes?
Absolutely, yes. The inability to remember and then becoming very.
Objection, Judge.
Okay, you can't talk about what he's saying.
He's about to testify to a statement of opinion.
Sustained.
Was there any doubt in your mind that this state of mind existed when you heard all this?
This was absolutely classic. There was no doubt in my mind.
Okay, and let's talk about false memories, okay? Do you recognize that phrase?
Yes.
Tell the jury just again clinically what that means to you.
Sure. You know, in studying memory, you come to realize that many people in many circumstances develop memories that are untrue, but they experience them as being true. And I did a study with one psychologist, well, actually a few psychologists, in which we realized that a false memory, after it's reviewed and reviewed and reviewed by the patient, by the individual, starts looking very much like a memory. So we went back and tried to understand how the memory developed, and what we saw was that false memories don't start as images, real memories, they start as beliefs. So many people with a false memory will say, I think I did it, or I think I saw it, and after a while, they work on it in their mind, and visual or, perceptual images start to develop that become memories. In fact, if you were to try to remember something that happened a long time ago, what you actually...
And in reviewing the information in this case, did you find some hallmarks consistent with that concept?
Perfectly consistent. I mean, again, very classic.
Okay, that's enough.
Objection, Judge.
That's enough.
He's getting into a
Sustained.
evaluation of Mr. Allen.
Sustained.
Is the answer yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, I don't have any further questions.
Ms. Diener.
Dr. Grassian, when you were just talking about the study on false memory and you said you provide a person with something and they review it and review it and review it and it becomes a memory, what did you provide them to review?
I didn't provide them anything to review. This is studies that were done by other researchers, like Elizabeth Loftus, for example, is quite famous in this area. Our work involved people who had a long period of time when they stated they had no memory for sexual abuse and then
I guess.
memories started.
May I be more specific?
Well,
What?
Sorry, we're getting off on a
Yeah.
tangent.
but she doesn't want to hear what he has to say. I mean,
I'm trying to be very specific about my question, and I'm making an effort.
Then, narrow your question down so that he knows what it specifically is.
thank you.
That you're asking him about.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Dr. Grassian. I just want to know what is it that the subject reviewed and reviewed and reviewed that then became a false memory? Was it a document? Was it a picture? In the study.
No. You're confused, because that is not our study. Our study was of people who had a long period of time of no memory for a traumatic event and...
So let me ask you about when you found the real memory. Would a real memory be detailed, chronological, logical?
I'm not.
The real memory versus the false memory.
Real memories are extremely perceptual is what I would say.
Perceptual?
Right.
Like they would.
I'm not sure what's your question.
Yeah, they would include insight maybe by the person telling the story.
Insight?
Insight. You know, relating events to feelings.
That's not intrinsic to it, but I supposed it would be common that would happen. But that's a different subject, different.
Okay.
Question.
Okay. So I guess the question of whether a real memory would include insight of the person telling the story, or maybe a reflection about how the events in the story made them feel, that does not lend itself to making it a true memory?
I'm sorry, I'm really confused by your question.
Okay, I'll move on. Are you aware of critical factors that are used in the prison setting when a decision is made to place a person in safekeeping?
I'm somewhat aware of it, but I don't consider myself as an expert on prison
Okay.
administration.
In your study of solitary confinement, do you distinguish solitary confinement for corrective or punishment purposes versus man's cell confinement for safety?
Well, what I concern myself with are the conditions of confinement. There are people, for example, who are in protective custody but are allowed to have conjoint recreation, conjoint activities with a small group of people who are safe.
Okay.
So what I'm concerned about is the situation that the individual has, the conditions they experience, whatever the reason is that the administration caused the person to be in that type of confinement.
But you acknowledge there's a difference between solitary confinement and one-man cell for safekeeping to protect a person confined. Would you agree?
In terms of the psychiatric impact, it would depend on the conditions that were imposed.
Okay, thank you. No other questions.
Mr. Razi.
Regardless of how somebody is labeled, would putting them in solitary confinement impact their brain?
Again, if the conditions of confinement are the defining factor, then independent of what the justification was for putting them in solitary confinement, it's about the conditions they experience.
I don't have anything further.
Okay. Ms. Diener.
Nothing further, Judge.
Does anybody on the jury have any questions for Mr. Grassian? I'm sorry, Dr. Grassian. All right. Would counsel approach?
Sidebar conference conducted.
Observing Mr. Allen daily in the courtroom, he has not seemed to be delirious or psychotic physically. Is this related to be because he is no longer in solitary confinement?
I don't think you should ask that.
That one leads back.
'Cause there's not enough facts and evidence to really.
Do you believe a completely normal person can become psychotic after spending 6 to 12 months in solitary confinement?
That's obviously a good question.
Do you believe psychotic behavior can go back to normal behavior after being removed from solitary confinement?
Yeah, that's fine.
Dr. Westcott's report states that Richard Allen functions with a cognitive ability that is 2 to 5% with his age and education, specifically impaired executive function. How would a person with this cognitive ability be affected by solitary confinement?
How?
That's another phrase of art.
How would a person who is cognitively impaired be affected by solitary confinement?
I kind of think.
That's really specific.
You're asking him. You're asking him to draw an opinion about things that you really didn't want him to testify about.
What relativity does an objective personality test provide into your diagnosis?
He doesn't. He didn't talk about doing any testing.
Yeah, outside the scope.
Yeah.
So no. Okay. So this is all no. Does someone being diagnosed with major depressive disorder with psychosis mean that any statements made cannot have any truth in them?
I say no. I just don't. I think he's not. I wanted him to testify about some of this stuff, but I don't think that was what Stuart Grassian he was allowed to do.
No.
So
these two, then.
Sidebar conference concluded.
Doctor, do you believe psychotic behavior can go back to normal behavior after being removed from solitary confinement?
Generally, the answer to that is yes, and of course, in some cases, we know that Mr. Allen had a psychotic.
Objection, Judge.
No, sir, just limit it to the question, please.
Okay. Yeah, but the answer's generally yes.
Okay. Mr. Rossi, any follow-up?
just 1 second. No follow-up.
Ms. Diener,
No follow-up.
do you believe a completely normal person can become psychotic after spending 6 months to a year in solitary confinement?
Absolutely. I've seen it happen.
Mr. Rossi, any follow-up?
No.
Ms. Diener,
No follow-up.
all right. Thank you, doctor. You may step down.